Righty-ho. I'm now live. Bye. Hello, who's there? Elaine, Rosie, anybody else? Sorry, I look a mess. That was very distressing. It was all about Chrome not being cooperative. Right, I'm going to look at the questions. Let me have a look. Okay. Emma Shields, are you there? Emma, are you still here? Can't hear me. Okay, why can't you hear me? That is very interesting. Hold on a second. Microphone should be on. Sound should be on. Allow. Let me try that. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello? Oops. Lost ya. Oh, there you are. Back again. Can you hear me? Hello? Oh, Elaine, jolly good. You can hear me. Davina, hi. Emma, are you here? Excellent. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I'm going to start. Sorry about all of this, guys. It was all down to Chrome messing about. I'm going to start with explaining or going through the questions from top to bottom. I hope the guys who asked the questions are still here. If not, do let me know via the APPC Facebook page, and I will do my best to answer you another way. So Emma has asked, how can you best prepare rescue dogs that suffer with separation anxiety to go into new homes? What's the best way to prepare potential owners? Tricky one. Basically, the first thing to do is to tell these people who are rescuing this dog that they can't just take the dog home, leave it at home for a couple of days, and then leave it alone and go out to work or go out to the shops or whatever. The dog will not be able to cope. They have to allow a good 2 to 3 weeks of acclimatization for the dog. After all, it's gone from one home, probably from several. It's been in rescue. Now it's going to another home. It doesn't know which way is up. So it needs time to settle down. Once it's settled, and during this period, you can do mini absences, like just a few seconds or a minute or so, and see if the dog can cope. If the dog does start to cope, because I have seen quite a few cases where after a few weeks, the dog has settled in and then the dog's fine. So it didn't really have separation anxiety. It really was trying to cope in a new home. However, if after a few weeks things are not fine, then you really have to get in touch with a qualified behaviorist to try and help you sort this out, because it is not an easy thing to do by yourself. Hope that helps. Sarah Tapsell, top tips for encouraging owners to persevere with the training plan. Oh, that's a good one. When I was training to be a separation anxiety trainer, as they call it in the States, One of the main things we were told is you're not just being a behaviorist. You're being a best friend. You're being a cheerleader. You're being a human counselor, because really you're working with the humans. They are going through what is incredibly amount of hard work and spending a lot of time. And there will be good times and there will be bad times. The most important thing to do, I think, is to make sure that these people don't set their goals too high. So do little goals. You know, getting out of the front door can be a huge goal. I'm working with a dog at the moment who within 5 seconds was howling. So the big thing is going to be getting out of that front door. That's a time for celebration. Get them to have a glass of wine, you know, do something that will mark that. If they can mark these small points, then it's going to be a lot easier for them when you come to the bit where the dog's suddenly regressed. And that's when you've really got to keep them going. You've got to be positive yourself. You've got to try and urge them forward. It's not always easy, but the more you can be the cheerleader, the better they would feel. They need empathy. They need sympathy. And you're the only one who can give it to them, because as far as they're concerned, you're the expert and you're the one who's leading the way. Lindsay Orr, this is a bit about your own dog, has a personal best of an hour, but also has days when only 7 minutes is possible. Should the training only be for 7-minute absences at this stage, or is it okay to work to what's possible on a particular day? Right, okay. In the words of all of us who do separation, it depends. One of the first things you've got to do is try and work out what the criteria are around that time when the dog's doing an hour and around the time when the dog's doing less than an hour, down to 7 minutes. Is it a different time of day? Is it a different person? Has the dog had enough exercise? Is the dog not feeling well? Is the dog noise phobic? So is the construction work going out, or a particular time of day when the bin men come round? There are a lot of variables. It's really important to keep a data log, to note down every day what is happening in the environment, so that you can go back and see if there's a pattern. But at the end of the time, if you can't work it out, you have to go down to the lowest common denominator. And you never, ever work in a straight line. We never go 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It doesn't work that way. You need to go up and down. So, for example, if you're on 7 minutes, the next day you would do 4 minutes. The day after that, you do 8 minutes. Then you do 5 minutes. Then you do 10 minutes. And you toggle between lower and higher and slowly increase the time. If you get stuck on a certain time, which happens, then toggle around that period of time until you can push the dog beyond it. But importantly, why is the dog okay for an hour on some times and 7 minutes for other times? What is the most common time that the dog is alone and okay, and work around that. Also, the other thing, of course, to remember is who's doing the session, because dogs will respond completely differently to different people. I have a client at the moment where the client has been working with the dog for a long time. She goes out, dog's fine for 2 hours, but she lives with her sister. If she's out and then her sister goes out, dog can't cope more than 10 minutes. So you need to work on all these individual parameters. Zoe Flower, I work for an animal charity. We'd love ideas of coping mechanisms for dogs being left in kennels overnight. We can see a clear difference in the dogs who have been kennelled before, maybe if their previous owners went on holiday, in comparison to the ones who have never been. A rescued kennel is ever-changing and very busy. We find the dogs adjust a little once they're used to the routine day to day, but for the first few days can be very stressful, especially when our staff leave. Yep, absolutely. Kennels are a really stressful environment, and a lot of dogs who don't have separation anxiety go into kennels to be rehomed, get rehomed, and then do. Honestly, for dogs who are put into an environment like that, I would speak to the vet about medication. You can try the over-the-counter stuff, see if that dog helps, like Adaptil, Nutricalm, ask your vet about it. But it may help the dog an enormous amount to be given some short-term medication to help them get over that period so that they can get used to the environment than they're in. And your vet will be the best person to advise you on what sort of medication is the best thing to use under those circumstances. So that's, I think, all the questions that I've got here. Has anybody else got any questions? I'm looking. Oh, here we go. Great, Lindsay, you will toggle. Helen McCann, what advice would you give to owners to prevent separation-related behaviours once they go back to work after an extended period at home due to COVID-19? Very, very good point, Helen. I actually anticipate once we come out of the end of this that separation anxiety specialists, their phones will be ringing off the hook. Dogs with no separation anxiety, and then suddenly they're used to being at home for a few hours, then the dog walker comes in, then they're at home for another few hours, or daycare's dropped them off. The important thing is to try as much as possible to maintain their routine. So take them out to the toilet. We are still allowed to walk our dogs. Take them out to the toilet at the same time. Give them a lot of enrichment at home, so games and training. But importantly, try and leave them alone 2 or 3 times a week as much as you can. So if you can, when you need to go to your supermarket, tell everybody else to sit in the car or go out and leave them alone. Go down to the park for a few minutes and leave them alone. Maintain the fact that they are being left alone so that they don't suddenly find when everybody goes back to work, well, everybody's been here for 8 weeks or 12 weeks or however long it's been, and suddenly I'm left alone. They will freak out. So keep those absences, even if they're only short, try and keep on top of them. Even if you, at the very least, go into a room and close the door so the dog's on the other side of the room, on the other side of the door by itself for half an hour. Try and do whatever you can to maintain the dog being alone. Right, anything else? Anybody else? Is that it? Come on, somebody must. God, that's only 15 minutes. I'll talk slower. Great, Lindsay, just going back to your thing about Lindsay Orr, about taking notes. Good thing is to set yourself up with an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet and put in date, time of session, how long the session took, did anything happen that day that was out of the ordinary, and what time you managed to get to on that particular day. And then you can see at a glance how the dog is doing. I also use a rating, a 1 to 4, where 1 is the best. In other words, the dog is fast asleep on the sofa, and 4 is the worst. The dog is crying, howling, whatever it does, and rate each session. And that way you can go back and you may be able to see a pattern of what is happening. When I say look at unusual things, it could even be it was windy. The dog had an argument with another dog in the park 5 hours ago. That can still affect the dog later on in the day. You know, fear doesn't suddenly, or anxiety doesn't suddenly vanish. So anything and everything that you can think of will really help. Okay. How to prevent weaning distress in puppies. Thank you very much, Elaine. I'm sure you know how to do that. And I'm afraid to say that I don't know on that one because I've never weaned a puppy. So it's an interesting thing. But again, I would say tiny little increments, just a little bit of time at a time. I speak to a lot of people who have been trying to train their dogs to be alone, and they've read the books, etc., etc., and they've gone, well, I've been working in very small increments. I've left the dog for 5 minutes, and then I've done 10 minutes. 5 minutes to a dog with separation anxiety is a lifetime. We're not talking about increments. I'm talking 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever the animal can cope with, and also measure how long the animal can cope by its anxiety threshold. And I should imagine this says the same for puppies. So if a puppy starts getting distressed after 5 seconds, then lower your criteria. Next time, do it for 3 seconds until he's comfortable at 3 seconds. And again, vary it. Go from 3 seconds to 1 second to 2 seconds to 7 seconds to 5 seconds to 10 seconds. So they never really know exactly. The most important thing is never build a pattern, because dogs are too clever and they understand patterns much better than we are. I don't know whether that would help in puppies, Elaine, but that kind of makes sense in what I do. So hopefully that will help a bit. A dog diary to include environment, noise, people, etc. Yep, absolutely, Dawn. Davina Connor, any advice for owners who pass feces when left, even if she goes to the bathroom? I'm assuming, Davina, that you mean that the dog has a poo when she's left alone, even if she's been to the bathroom before. Yeah, that's a classic sign of anxiety. If there is no medical reason for it, first thing I would do is make sure that there is no medical reason. So speak to your vet, get a full examination. But it can be a sign of anxiety. So if it's usually not just going to be having a poo on the floor. It can often be, where is the dog having the poo? But there are likely to be other signs as well. There may be, we all know that there's a raft of signals that a dog can give out when it's anxious. So it could include pacing or panting or drooling or barking or howling. One thing that's really important to remember is that not all signs of anxiety are obvious. Not all dogs howl or bark. Not all dogs destroy things. Some dogs are completely silent. One dog I worked with, his version of panicking was standing frozen at the front door for hours. He didn't move. Now, luckily we had a client who had recorded him and got worried and contacted me. Now, dog sleeps on the sofa for 5-6 hours, perfectly happy. Goes, checks out the front door every now and then and goes, yeah, they're not home, I'll go back to the sofa. But this can be a sign, and usually there will be other signs. In essence, the only way you know if a dog has separation issues is to watch it when it's alone. Record it on a video, watch it on FaceTime or Zoom or Skype or whatever you can if you've got a camera. That is the only way to know, because, as I said, some anxiety signals are silent. And we must never assume that just because a dog's not howling or barking or destroying things, that they're not incredibly frightened. Milena, who, most of us know is the guru of separation anxiety, uses an analogy which is like, if you have two people who have a spider phobia, one person will see a spider and scream and run away, and the other person will see a spider and freeze and go completely silent. But underneath, they're equally terrified. Just because one isn't screaming doesn't mean that they're not frightened. So it's really important to watch the dog, pick up on those tiny little signs of anxiety. which basically means the dog is over threshold. Okay, continuing. Do you use food as part of training? Sorry, this is Lindsay Orr again. He doesn't eat when I leave, but I've been giving him bits on returns once he's a bit settled. No, don't use food as part of training, because leaving a dog food can be a signal to the dog that you're leaving. So it becomes a pre-departure cue, if you like. And let's face it, even if a dog does eat when they're anxious and you're trying to train the dog to be alone for 5 hours, there is no way we can leave enough food for 5 hours. And if the dog does eat for 5 hours, you're going to have another problem, which is an overweight dog. So no, giving him a few bits when you come back, once he's a bit settled, yeah, that's fine, but it's actually not going to make an awful lot of difference. He's going to just like having a treat because he's settled. He's not really going to associate it with you coming back home. We basically, if to use the words desensitization and counter conditioning, if we know what that means, with the way I treat separation anxiety, we use the desensitization part, not the counter conditioning part. And later, once the dog is cured, in inverted commas, then we may leave it food as sort of boredom busters, something to do, but it's not part of the training process. He doesn't, Davina, he does pace and walks it everywhere. He doesn't vocalize. I would say, Davina, that this dog probably does have separation anxiety, and I would strongly recommend that you get in touch with a qualified behaviorist who can help you resolve these issues, because it is very difficult to resolve on your own. Working with dogs with separation anxieties, I'm sure Davina, who's been doing it, will say it can be very nuanced. It can be very picking up on tiny little things to understand when a dog's over the threshold, under the threshold, time to move on, time to move backwards, which is why a lot of clients find it very difficult to do by themselves and end up employing the services of a professional. So I would say that, yes, something you really need to look at. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, keep going. Deb Jarrett, what about owners who have to leave their dog for longer than the dog's threshold? What can be done? Many owners can't stay with their dog except for the small windows of 7 minutes or so. I had a single woman with a rescue greyhound and she really suffered. Yes, Deb, that's a biggie. I'm afraid to say that the way I work and the way my colleagues who are certified separation anxiety trainers work, I know other people use different methods, which they say, may work. Basically, working with dogs with separation anxiety is a heck of a long process. We are talking months of work. On average, I will work with a client for at least 4 to 6 to 8 to 9 months. So it is an awfully long time. And what we've got to remember is that you can't leave the dog alone. Every time a dog with separation anxiety is left alone, he becomes more frightened of being alone. And honestly, it's not logical. If you think about other behaviors that we deal with, say dog aggression, say you've got a dog who is aggressive to black Labradors. The first thing we tell owners is to keep that dog away from black Labradors so that he doesn't practice his behavior and we don't put him in a situation where he feels fearful enough to become aggressive to that dog. Well, it's the same with separation anxiety. And honestly, I don't think it works. And I personally won't work with anybody who cannot guarantee that they won't leave their dog. And also, I speak to an awful lot of people about this, and this is the number one problem. A lot of people with separation anxiety dogs have already worked out a way not to leave their dog alone because it's annoying their neighbors, they don't want their dog to be distressed, whatever it is. But if you actually sit down with somebody who does have this problem, there are a huge amount of ways to get your dog looked after by it, because it doesn't have to be the owner. If the dog is okay with other people, and you may have to do some work if the dog isn't comfortable with other people on that side of things before you start the separation anxiety, which is also possible. But there are a million ways to get a dog looked after. It's basically like we say, bringing up kids. You need a village, and you have to think out of the box sometimes. And I think part of the work of the behaviorist is helping the client work out these ways of doing it. And promise you, it can be done. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job. So I know all my clients manage to do it in one way or another, as do all of the people who work in the same way as I do. Jane Appleton. Do you recommend? No, I think I've already answered that. Recommend counter conditioning alongside desensitization training? No, is the answer to that. It's pure desensitization. You're not trying to create a positive association with you leaving. I don't think anything in the world is going to create a positive association with you leaving. Dogs are social animals. They're not built to be alone. They like living in groups. What we have to do is not teach them to be happy about being alone, but teaching them to be able to happily cope with being alone. There's a difference. So doing pure desensitization over a long period of time, very carefully, teaches them the world is not going to end if I'm alone in the house. And giving them treats and stuff honestly doesn't help. Not in my experience anyway. Okay, Amy Thompson. Any advice for settling pups overnight? Often advise bringing them into the bedroom with owners, but some are reluctant to do this. Yeah, again, it's a tricky one. It depends. Are they expecting the pup to be in a crate? Are they expecting the pup to be in a bed? I do recommend that they be in the bedroom with the owners, and then once the pup starts to settle, slowly moving it outside. Again, crate training during the day as well. And because a lot of people, pup comes home, there's the crate, in you go, shut the door, expect you to get on with it. That's not going to work. So you're taking on a baby. You need to give this animal time to adjust. It's the first time that this animal has been away from its siblings, its mother, an environment it knows. So I think, again, it's explaining to the owners why this is so important. And honestly, in my experience, not just as a behaviorist, but in all the other work I've done over the years, working with clients in all sorts of spheres, if you explain to somebody in a really sort of positive way why they need to do something, 9 times out of 10 they'll come around to your way of thinking. And explain to them this is not forever. This is just until the pup settles, and then you can slowly move the crate out of the bedroom, onto the landing, down the stairs, or alternatively, sleep on the sofa, next to the crate for a few nights. One thing a client of mine did do, which worked extremely well with a dog who wouldn't settle, is apparently you can get a heartbeat app on a phone. And she got this heartbeat app, and she put the phone outside the crate, and she also got one of those warming mats that she put inside the crate. And she sat with the dog, and in 5 minutes the dog was fast asleep. Worth a try. It may work. Jane Appleton, do you recommend medication for all dogs undergoing desensitization programs? Jane, if you're specifically talking about separation anxiety, then the answer is 9 times out of 10, yes. Because again, it's a heck of a long process. We need to get those anxiety levels down so that the dog's able to learn. And I have worked with people who don't want to use medication. Absolutely fine. 6 weeks into the program, they're going, now about that medication, Ingrid, because it does speed up progress, which not only helps the dog, but helps the owners. We've got to remember that this isn't just about the dog. This is about the owners. Owners of separation anxiety dogs are putting their lives on hold for this dog. They can't go out to the shops. They can't go out for dinner. They can't go on holiday. All sorts of things they cannot do. So it's not only about helping this dog live or, you know, be okay when there's nobody at home. It's also giving the owners their lives back. So anything we can do that is not harmful to the animal is going to be beneficial. So yes, I would say go talk to your vet, talk to them about it. You know, if they want to talk to the behaviorist, fine. See what they recommend as medication and use it. And again, I'm talking about long-term medication, not situational medication, because we're talking about months of working with the animal. Yeah, your vet behaviorist has other ideas. Jane, where are you based? Are there any calming medications you'd recommend? As a last resort, I'm trying everything I can right now. In my experience, Jade, this is Jade LW, in my experience and also talking to all my colleagues who are separation trainers, over-the-counter stuff doesn't really do anything, doesn't really touch the sides. And to be honest, we think it's kind of a bit of a waste of money. If you calming medication means prescription medications, so you need to talk to your vet and see what they recommend, and that will really be the only thing that will help your dog. Kate Middleton, any advice for introducing a new puppy to a resident dog? Kate, that's not really a separation anxiety question, so I'm just going to whiz over that. Oh, thank you. Jane Appleton, it's so hard to manage, but I won't leave him, and it's taken a long while to get him settled with a dog sitter. I'm in Leicestershire. Jane Appleton, again, get in touch with a qualified behaviorist who can help you, because I think, you know, it is hard to manage. It is difficult. If you've got him with a dog sitter, that's fantastic. Speak to your vet about medication, but remember, medication is not a cure. It doesn't cure the separation. It helps the dog. It gives the dog the ability to learn by reducing anxiety. If you just use medication, once the dog comes off medication, you'll be right back to square one. So you need to do a program of behavior modification as well. Lindsay, or if using meds, how long after doing the work do they have to stay on them? He's blooming in other areas with confidence, so I haven't used meds yet. Okay. What we generally recommend is that they're on the meds, and quite often you're going to have to alter dosages with the vet. Quite often you're going to have to change the medication or add to the medication. Your vet will be able to tell you. What we generally recommend is once you've hit your target, whatever that may be, and that varies. So say, for example, your target is to leave the dog for 4 hours, then you still need to continue the work, even if you're not working with a professional. So you would still do some toggling during the week. You know, one day you'll do 4 hours, another day you do an hour, and another day you do 2 hours. Keep the dog on the medication for at least another 6 months, and to make sure that the behavior is solid. because I think in separation, as with a lot of other behaviors that we work with, just because the dog copes with it once doesn't mean it's going to cope again. So you have to make sure that the dog is able to cope with whatever target you've set over a period of time. Keep the dog on the medication while you're doing that, and then reduce the medication a little bit at a time over a period of time. Again, talk to your vet about how to do that. And on each time you reduce the dose, or whatever it is you're using, see how the dog reacts with being left. So then you'll know whether it's the dog has learned the behavior and the dog is happy being alone, or whether it's the medication. If it's the medication, then you've got to go back to more behavior modification, because you've proved then it's the medication that's helping the dog relax. The dog hasn't actually learned 100% yet to be happy being alone, or I use the word happy, to cope with being alone. Okay, I've got to the end of my scrolling down. Let me just make sure. I know this has been a lot shorter than it should have been. Thank you, Google Chrome. Does anybody else have any other questions? I'm happy to go on for another few minutes, as we were so late in starting, if anybody does. No? Great. Okay. Well, it's been great talking to everybody. I hope I've answered some of your questions. Obviously, if you do have other questions, you can get in touch with me through the APBC website, or any of our other... Oh, no, Jane Appleton's come back. We've been working on desensitization. Took 2 months to work through being able to open the door under threshold. Yeah, I can believe that. Can now leave for 10 seconds, but only when he is tired in the evenings. Vet behaviorist didn't want to use meds because I don't have to leave him over threshold, and he is... Jane, I think you're probably in America, based on your spelling. Yeah, can't say I would agree with your vet behaviorist. Perhaps, Jane, you could contact me separately and we could have a bit of a chat about it. Probably need a bit more information than you're able to give. Deb Jarrett, are rescue dogs more likely to have separation anxiety? To be honest, the jury's out on that one. A lot of studies have said yes, some studies have said no. I think the factor with separation anxiety is a huge and often traumatic change in a dog's life. I know dogs who have not had separation anxiety have then moved home and suddenly got it. Another big trigger is dogs who've been transported long distances. So if dogs are coming from Europe, that's quite possible. There have actually been a couple of studies recently which have shown that there may be a genetic component. So something like that could trigger it. A lot of the time, to be honest, a lot of the dogs that I do see and my colleagues see are rescue dogs. But why were they put into rescue? Did they have separation anxiety before and that's why they were put into rescue? I don't know. So it's a tricky one, but it is fairly common. There you go. Amy, any recommendations for resources for pup owners at the moment about pups learning to be left alone that I can share with my clients? There are several books. Life Skills for Puppies is an excellent book on all sorts of things, not just about teaching puppies to be left alone. There's also quite a lot of good resources on, I think the APBC has got a good article on it on our website, also on some of the charity websites like the Blue Cross and RSPCA have got good articles on it. At the end of the day, it's tiny, tiny increments once the puppy has got used to being at home. So give the puppy a couple of weeks and then start teaching it just by going out the room, coming back, and so on and so forth. But most books, good books written about how to bring up a puppy will cover this. Helen's book on life skills for puppies is excellent in that respect. Anybody else? No? Okay, give it a minute or so. Yeah, so as I was saying, it's little tiny increments. It's understanding body language, critical. You need to be able to speak dog to be able to do this work with your dog or with a client's dog. It's a process. It's a heck of a process, and it takes a long time. As Jane said, 2 months to work through being able to open the door under threshold. Yeah, that's quite a long time. I personally would have suggested medication, but I'm sure her vet behaviorist didn't want to use meds for the reasons that they gave. So it is a long process. Behaviorists who are working with clients with dogs with separation anxiety, patience, a lot of patience, a lot of sympathy, and an awful lot of empathy with those clients. They are honestly the most wonderful clients in the world. They are the most compliant clients in the world. And boy, do they love their dogs. So they are people really, really worth working with. Okay, Jane's just said that Emily Lalem on her Kiko Pup YouTube channel has a good video showing teaching puppies to cope alone. So that's another one, Amy, that you can have a look at. And Emily certainly knows her stuff. So that's another good resource to send people to. Anything else? No? Sorry about the mess behind me. And my dog over there. No, over there. I can't point backwards. Sorry. Okay. So, guys, well, thank you ever so much for coming along. It was great, and I hope I've helped. And if you have more questions, then get in touch. I'll do my best to help you. So I'm going to say bye-bye now, and I'm going to say to you all, please, please keep safe and keep well and follow the government guidelines. Night, night.